are coming on the air tonight with the brand new charges against the man accused of trying to assassinate the president at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Some of those new details now on how he obtained multiple guns, the other charges he could face soon, and where this investigation goes next. Plus, here in Washington, the red carpet rolled out, quite literally, for the royals. The pomp and the politics as the king looks to use his relationship with the president to try to repair the rift between the U.S. and the U.K. Then more than 40 million people are at real risk right now. You've got a lot of wind, big hail, and maybe powerful tornadoes set to sweep across a bunch of the country. We'll tell you where these already deadly storms are headed next. Then one of the most well-known voices in the world making a big move to try to protect herself from AI impersonators.
Are you ready for it?
So can Taylor Swift take on AI and win? Plus, how a true crime podcast helped solve a real-life cold case, the show that helped blow open a 40-year-old murder investigation. That's coming up a little bit later on in the show. Hey, I'm Hallie, and we start tonight with those new charges just in, and maybe more on the way, for the suspected shooter at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, now accused of trying to kill the president.
Make no mistake, this was an attempted assassination of the President of the United States, with the defendant making clear what his intent was. And that intent was to bring down as many of the high-ranking cabinet officials as he could.
You're looking at new sketches here of Cole Allen, the teacher, the engineer from California in a blue jumpsuit, making his first court appearance. He did not enter a plea. In court, federal prosecutors shared some stuff we didn't know before about what happened on Saturday night. You're seeing some of the scene here, saying Allen had a shotgun, a pistol, 3 knives. This is the moment he was taken down. And then here are some new pictures of those weapons. According to new court documents, he bought both guns from dealers in California, where he's from. Remember, Allen wrote in what the DOJ calls a manifesto that he believed it was his duty to try to target the Trump administration. We've got team coverage with Tom Winter standing by, but I want to start with Gary Grumbach outside the courthouse in Washington. The Trump administration, Gary, says more charges could come soon. Walk us through what we've learned from some of these charging documents so far.
Yeah, Cole Tomas Allen, Hallie, charged with 3 counts. First count is the attempted assassination of the President of the United States. If he's convicted on this, he could spend the rest of his life behind bars. He was also charged with transportation of a firearm and ammunition through interstate commerce with the intent to commit a felony. And he was also charged with the discharge of a firearm during a crime of violence. And if you're convicted on that crime, you spend an additional 10 years behind bars in addition to anything else. Now, U.S. Attorney Jimmy Kimmel here in Washington, D.C. said during a press conference there would be additional charges. We don't yet know what those are going to be, but this investigation, Hallie, as you know, is only about 48 hours old. They still have a lot of investigating to do, a lot of people to talk to involved in this man's life. It's back from California. He took a train from California to Chicago and then here to Washington, D.C. So they're just starting to piece together exactly why he did what he did on Saturday night.
I'm going to ask you to stand by for a second here, because, Tom, I want to get into some of the timeline of the shooting and some of the questions around the specific shots fired and the questions there. Walk us through that, because I know there's some interesting things that were shared at that news conference not long ago.
Yeah, so that's something that I'm still waiting to get some more details on and what was shared there. I think the general gist of it was that following, and I misheard you there, Hallie, so you may be referring to something that I was talking about with the control room. You're speaking about the press conference involving the acting Attorney General of the United States. Yes, a couple of different things from that press conference I took away with the fact that the U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro mentioned this idea of the fact that he knew that Trump was in the ballroom, and in the complaint, and it can't be an accident, there's a reference to the fact that the White House Correspondents' Dinner, as everybody knows, is televised. And so I wonder if when they got to the hotel room, they were watching, they found that the TV was on and that he was watching these, the ceremonies that were taking place just several floors below him. And then that allowed him to kind of time when he should go down. In other words, everybody would have been in that ballroom. Maybe they were breaking down security. Maybe that allowed him a little bit more freedom of movement. as you see him go through that checkpoint. And so I think that's going to be an interesting thing that we'll need to watch. Just how much surveillance he had put into this, I think is something that is worth looking at. The other thing that I initially thought, and excuse me for confusing us all, is that there were just some statements that were made by members of Congress who had gotten a briefing from the Secret Service. And apparently, according to Congressman Dick Durbin, there was a briefing that was held. And in the course of that briefing, there was some, he brought up the fact that the Secret Service really walked him through the security for this hotel and their experience with the security for the hotel. And it was his opinion that they had the right security plan in place based on their knowledge of it.
We're asking you to juggle a lot, my friend, so thank you. No, I know from both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue, Washington to New York and beyond. Gary, let me go back to you at the courthouse here, because one of the things that I know that Tom was looking at over the course of the weekend, you as well, as these court documents have come out, is how the suspect got these guns, how he got to D.C., and some of the questions around his movements. We'll get to Tom on the ideology in a second, but Gary, lay that piece out for us.
Yeah, so Allen had 2 firearms with him when he committed the shooting. He had one 12-gauge pump-action shotgun. That was the one that he appeared to have fired. And he also had a .38 caliber semi-automatic pistol. Now, he purchased both of these guns in recent years from dealers in California. So it appears those perhaps were licensed guns to that individual. These also were both the same guns that he used in this crime on Saturday night. Now, of course, he also had in his possession 3 knives and what is being referred to as other dangerous paraphernalia. Now, we don't yet know exactly what that phrase means, but that was the phrase that was used by prosecutors here in court earlier this afternoon. As this investigation unfolds, I think we'll get a lot more details as to what exactly those dangerous paraphernalia was.
Gary Grumbach, thank you very much. Tom, let me go to you, because a senior law enforcement official has told NBC News that the suspect's sister says he was part of a group called the Wide Awakes. The acting attorney general, Todd Blanche, was asked about that just in the last couple of hours. Let me play a little bit of what Blanche had to say.
Are you investigating connections that Cole Allen allegedly had to left-wing groups? I think one is called the Wide Awakes, reportedly.
Yes.
Who are they? Who are the Wide Awakes? What does it mean? What does it signal to the DOJ?
Well, I'm chuckling because of the depth of the answer from the acting attorney general. But I think this is a group, I got to say, was not on my bingo card here. They're not particularly well known. There is a long history to them that stems back to Abraham Lincoln and the idea of supporting him and his policies. It was a popular movement at the time. It then subsequently waned, as you can imagine, given the fact that it's well over 100 years, and then came back is a way of saying, look, the Wide Awakes are people that are awake to the fact of what is going on in the country as it pertains, in their words, what Donald Trump is doing. So they're awake to that. They feel that the Republican Party has gotten away from the values of Abraham Lincoln. And so this is a movement that kind of challenges many of the beliefs and I guess I would say the beliefs in the propaganda or the rhetoric that comes from some involved in the Trump movement. So that is kind of their purview. To the extent that they are some sort of an organized group or some sort of designated organization, I think that's taking it far too far at this stage. But, you know, these things change so much, Hallie, as you know. It could be the next big group that we end up talking about here in several months' time. Who knows?
Tom Winter, Gary Grumbach, thank you both very much. Lots to follow on this front. Appreciate it. We're going to keep an eye on any developments there. But as all this is happening, you've also got the Trump family blasting ABC and Jimmy Kimmel after the First Lady said Kimmel, in her words, spread hateful and violent rhetoric. She's referencing a joke that Kimmel made on his show a couple days right before the White House Correspondents' Dinner. This was last week. Going to play that for you here. Watch.
Our First Lady Melania is here. Look at Melania, so beautiful. Mrs. Trump, you have a glow like an expectant widow.
Like an expectant widow, Kimmel said. This is part of a bit he was doing, acting like he was kind of delivering the speech at the Correspondents' Dinner, with the backlash to what he just said erupting today at the White House. Watch.
Much of the manifesto of the would-be assassin is indistinguishable from the words that we hear daily from so many. Who in their right minds says a wife would be glowing over the potential murder of her beloved husband? And having experienced what I did with the First Lady on Saturday night, I can tell you that she was anything but that.
So in a post online, Melania Trump calls Kimmel a coward who, according to her, hides behind ABC because he knows the network will keep running cover to protect him. Remember, Kimmel was already pulled off the air for nearly a week after some jokes he made about Charlie Kirk's killing. NBC News has reached out to ABC, Walt Disney Company, Kimmel's publicist. We haven't heard back just yet. I want to bring in Chloe Melas. And Chloe, you've heard a couple of things here. You heard the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, as we just showed, sort of link the rhetoric from Kimmel here to some of what she has described as violent rhetoric that, in her view, has led to this culture or this moment where people feel like they can, walk into the correspondents' dinner with a gun. The White House is also making clear that they want ABC to take some action here. We have seen ABC take action against Jimmy Kimmel before in a very different context. Walk us through what we're hearing from everybody on this. Not much yet from Disney, which owns ABC, right?
That's right. We've also reached out to Nexstar and Sinclair, these companies that own many of these ABC local affiliates that air Jimmy Kimmel's late night show. I just got off the phone with Brendan Carr, the head of the FCC, and he said that he had no comment about this right now. But what I will say is that you could potentially see Jimmy's show go off the air, but Disney has been staunchly supporting him ever since he came back to the airwaves in the fall. And really ever since then, the gloves have been off for Jimmy Kimmel. No holds barred. He has been attacking the president and also the first lady whenever he can. But he's always said that, he stands behind the First Amendment, that this is comedy, and that this is what his late night viewers want to watch. And if they don't want to watch him, I'm paraphrasing here, they can change the channel. But obviously, there are a lot of people that don't like Jimmy Kimmel, and they feel like his jokes push the envelope too far. And so this is all playing out in real time right now. But if you look at what Melania has posted on X, she writes, "Enough is enough. It's time for ABC to take a stand." How many times will ABC's leadership enable Kimmel's atrocious behavior at the expense of our community? And you also have the president, like you said, calling for Disney and ABC to fire Kimmel immediately. So, Hallie, this is a developing story, and we'll keep you posted.
Chloe Melas, thank you very much. Also here in Washington, you've got King Charles and Queen Camilla late today making their first stops on this big 4-day visit to the U.S. They are right now headed to a garden party as we speak over at the British Embassy after, in just the last hour, the red carpet, you see quite literally rolled out for them. Here they are getting out of their motorcade, both the King and the Queen greeted by the First Lady, greeted by the President as well. The start of a whole bunch of pageantry, but also some diplomacy, too. Officially, this whole thing is to mark the 250th anniversary of American independence from Britain. And obviously, even with the security scare that we talked about on Saturday, this visit is continuing as planned. The royals are kind of tasked with doing something we don't normally see the royals do. That's some heavy lifting when it comes to the diplomatic push to try to repair the rift between the U.S. and the U.K., largely over the U.S.'s war against Iran. I want to get to Monica Alba at the White House. And it's this interesting thing here. The King and President Trump, by the president's own telling, are close. The president has said he loves the guy, basically. They're friends. He's excited for this visit. The president feels very differently about the British prime minister. So here you have King Charles coming. Typically, it would be very ceremonial. We still have a lot of that pageantry, but there's also some politics involved as well.
Yeah, it's hard to ignore the politics here, Hallie. And you're right. The president calls King Charles a fantastic man, someone that he says he's grown quite close with, who he has known for a very long time and has been in touch with on many different topics. So there's always the private conversations that we may not hear a lot about. But this is President Trump that we're talking about, who sometimes does make public things that are intended to be kept behind the scenes. So even if they do have some of these conversations that veer into some of the more controversial topics, it's always possible we will hear a little bit more about them from President Trump's side of things. It is unlikely we will hear very much from Buckingham Palace's perspective, because they say that for the royals, this visit isn't about politics. They say that they would like King Charles and Queen Camilla to stay focused on the shared vision and history of the United States and the UK, but not necessarily to be in the political fray. But again, it's very hard to separate that from what we know President Trump has publicly said when it comes to bashing the UK Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, specifically for his concerns about the war against Iran. And it is possible that that will enter the conversation with the King and Queen. Hallie.
What's not on the schedule as you look ahead, Monica, we've got the garden party, we've got the joint address to Congress tomorrow, where the King was invited to talk about, just as you lay out, reaffirming the vision of the special relationship between the two nations. What's not on the schedule is any meeting with Epstein survivors. As expected, we know, and we've spoken with the family of Virginia Roberts Giuffre, for example, one of Epstein's most prominent accusers, given the relationship between King Charles and his brother, the now former Prince Andrew. That has been also, I think, a part of the storyline that's woven through this week.
Yeah, it's hard to also not acknowledge that, even though potentially on this visit you won't see King Charles or Queen Camilla proactively acknowledge that in any way, but it is possible that they could be confronted with questions about that. Certainly there will be reporters around them over the next couple of days. Now, they are sometimes met with these questions and then they simply ignore them, or they don't necessarily engage with them. So it will be interesting to see if they talk about it at all. President Trump, for his part, has not been wanting to talk about Jeffrey Epstein, but his wife, the First Lady, surprised a lot of people a couple of weeks ago when she made that unscheduled appearance to share her thoughts and trying to really distance herself from the late sex offender. So we have seen actually a return to the headlines a little bit on the overall story, and it was the First Lady, Melania Trump, who is pushing for some Epstein survivors and victims to potentially go to Capitol Hill and share their own stories in the form of an open hearing there. It's unclear whether that will actually happen. So it is in the conversation, even though it's not going to be technically on the agenda. Hallie.
Monica Alba live for us there on the North Lawn. Mon, thank you very much. We'll keep an eye on any developments on that front as well, but we've also got to track tonight these storms moving fast, a bunch of them set to slam some 40 million people from Michigan down to Texas. We may see some powerful tornadoes as part of that system, too, already in Kansas. Take a look at what they're dealing with. Look how big that hail is there. On your left, you've got Missouri with, wow, that wind is just ripping through. A lot of rain there, too. Here's what's left of a barn about 100 miles east of Kansas City. It's torn up into pieces. That's after tornadoes touched down in several states in the last 48 hours. This train derailed in Kansas. And in Oklahoma, we spotted some funnel clouds, too. All of these spots, you can see, are bracing for another round of dangerous storms tonight. We've got team coverage on this. Bill Cairns will have the forecast in a second. But I want to start with Shaquille Brewster out there for us in St. Louis. Shaq, what's it like?
Well, Hallie, right now it's calm. You kind of see it behind me. The sun's peeking out in some places. There was a little bit of rain earlier today, but the warning that you're hearing from many meteorologists, if you watch local news, they are in rolling coverage right now, and that's because these conditions can change extremely quickly. We know that there's a tornado watch going into the evening. There's a threat of that severe weather, the rain, the lightning, the golf ball size hail for much of this area, and the risk, of course, of those tornadoes. And that is why folks in St. Louis have been, they've had their guard up. You've had schools let out early dismissals at several schools, churches canceling some services for this evening. You even had a court, the circuit court, ending the day early because of the threat of not just tornadoes, but possibly strong tornadoes. And there's some fear here. There's some trauma in the St. Louis area. You'll remember it was about a year ago, May 16th, 2025, when you had that outbreak of tornadoes go through, strong tornadoes that tore through the metro St. Louis area. We saw on Sunday, because of this forecast, because of what's expected for later today, you had people waiting in line for hours to get weather radios that were being handed out for free. So that is the situation here. It's calm right now. You see the skies are not too scary, but meteorologists saying that this is a situation that can change very quickly as we get later into the evening, Hallie.
Shaq Brewster, thank you very much for being there. Bill Cairns, that tees you up well, because how many times do you and I sit here and talk about how dangerous it is when night starts to fall right around now, right? It's kind of the witching hour because people are at home. You've got the possibility these twisters could spin up with very little notice.
Yeah, this has all the hallmarks of being a late evening and a dangerous evening well after people go to bed. Earlier today, it rained heavily in this area, so that kind of used up the energy. And so now those clouds had to go away. The sun is back out. That's heating the atmosphere up, and that's the energy for the storms. So that's why we're a little delayed in our severe weather today. But we think it's going to explode as we go throughout the next 6 hours. So we currently have storms. I mean, we've had hail reports. We've had some wind. We even have 2 tornado warnings. The areas in watches go from St. Louis all the way down to Memphis. This one is called a PDS, so that we call a particularly dangerous situation tornado watch. That means the ingredients are there for not just like a regular tornado, but for a strong, possibly a violent tornado, the type that could take out, a community or a town. So that's the area that goes from Paducah to Jackson, Tennessee, to Memphis to Jonesboro. St. Louis is in what we call our regular tornado watch. Still means you can get a strong storm, hopefully just not something that's, violent. So those active tornado warnings, we got 2 little hooks coming off these storms. This doesn't look too bad on radar right now. These are radar indicated. This is just north of Interstate 70, just north here, east of Columbia, Missouri. This red area in here is our moderate risk. That's where we expect, the greatest chance of those strong strong tornadoes, and we've kind of extended this a little further to the south there, and it will include the Memphis area. So this is where we could see what we call EF3. That's considered a strong tornado. The scale goes from 0 to 5 being like, the strongest ones. That the only thing left is usually the slab of the house that it was sitting on. So this is the risk area tonight. And by the time these storms get to Jonesboro, Memphis, and Paducah, it'll probably be like 10 p.m., maybe close to midnight. And so there's going to be a lot of people, going to bed anxious tonight in those areas as we watch those storms. Tomorrow, we still have a threat of storms, Hallie, not the intense danger for those strong tornadoes like this evening. So I'll keep you posted. And, for everyone in those danger areas, make sure you have your phones on tonight.
Yeah, no kidding.
Whatever way you get your alerts, make sure you can get them.
Stay close to a camera. Bill Cairns, thanks, pal. Appreciate you. Let's talk about oil prices closing at the highest they've been in 2 weeks today, with the fate of peace talks with Iran very much in limbo. President Trump's meeting with his top national security advisors, as we're learning Iran is offering up this new proposal. They want to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. But this, and that's like a ton of the world's oil goes through that strait. But this Iranian proposal would also kick the can down the road when it comes to nuclear negotiations. That may be a non-starter for the U.S., according to a Gulf source and a regional source. Remember, the president has canceled plans to send officials to Pakistan for talks this past weekend. And in the region, you've got scenes like this in Lebanon as Israel launches strikes, even with that 3-week extension of the ceasefire brokered by the U.S. Let me bring in Matt Bradley in Tel Aviv for us. Okay, so there's this new proposal on the table. Real questions about whether the U.S. is going to pick it up, take it seriously, and where this goes. Help us understand the dynamics, basically, because it feels like maybe the ball is in the American court.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, what we're seeing now is a proposal that could work. It would open up the Strait of Hormuz. It would basically return the situation to the status quo before the war, more or less, with obviously a lot of Iranian losses in leadership and materiel. What it would not do is address that critical question that you're mentioning, the critical question of Iran's ability to enrich further uranium. And the problem is that was one of the main reasons why President Trump and Netanyahu of Israel decided to launch that war on February 28th. And it is still one of the unanswered ambitions of this conflict. So the president is going to have to be in a very, very compromising kind of mood to accept this deal and to give up his leverage over that nuclear file. Even as these negotiations started, the president and his top people have made it very clear that making sure that Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon, at least within the next couple of decades, is one of their priorities. So to accept this proposal, well, it would open up the Strait of Hormuz. It would certainly do a lot to appease markets and American consumers throughout the world who are suffering from these rising prices. What it would not do is help burnish any justification for a war that many Americans and many people here in Israel, a lot of Israelis, are turning against.
What about the role of Russia in all of this? Because the Iranian foreign minister met with Putin today in Russia, right? Like, what's their end game there?
Well, I mean, the Iranian foreign minister is now going around and clearly trying to shore up a bunch of allies. He went to Oman, a country that's near Iran, that was very instrumental in negotiating that President Obama's JCPOA back in 2015, the one that President Trump then tore up. These lifted sanctions on the Iranians at the same time checked their nuclear program. So Oman is a big piece. Abbas Araghchi went to Pakistan twice over the last couple of days. So what we're seeing is Russia kind of on just another stop on a diplomatic tour, trying to get Iran's allies in place before this war restarts and while they're in the process of negotiating. When we're talking about Russia, China, Iran, these are countries that, really exist just on the fringes of the international community. And when one of them gets more and more ostracized, we tend to see the others kind of coalescing. We saw this when Russia invaded Ukraine, but it's never clear whether that actually brings any real benefits to these countries.
Matt Bradley live for us there in Tel Aviv. Matt, thank you very much for that reporting. Appreciate it. Coming up, more to get to here on the show, including some scary stuff out of Indonesia, with crews now looking for survivors after 2 trains collided. What we're learning about what exactly went wrong. Plus, why 2 of the biggest names in tech are facing off in court. At stake, about $100 billion and the future of a massive AI company. We've got the insults next. So in the last couple of hours, attorneys for Elon Musk and a California judge have been butting heads during jury selection in this massive multi-billion-dollar civil trial pitting tech billionaire against tech billionaire. It's a case that could determine the future of one of the world's biggest AI companies. And that is just the latest drama here. In the last couple of hours, a judge told attorneys for Musk that the reality is that people don't like him, but went on to say that that doesn't mean Americans can't have integrity for the judicial process. That was after she didn't strike a juror who said so-called mean things about Musk. It is like something, gang. The whole thing is partly a business fight, but it's also pretty personal for Sam Altman and for Musk. Their beef has been public for years. About a decade ago, Musk co-founded and helped fund OpenAI as a nonprofit. But Musk says Altman betrayed him when he made the nonprofit for profit. Altman, for his part, says Musk just wanted OpenAI for himself. It's been a whole thing for years. Lately, Musk has been calling his now nemesis Scam Altman, saying that Altman and OpenAI's co-founders stole a charity, quote unquote. Brian Chung is following this story for us. This is not exactly petty drama. There's $134 billion on the line in this civil trial. And it's also interesting, and that's why the judge stuff just in the last couple of minutes was interesting, because how do you find a juror that doesn't have feelings about either of these two guys, especially when this is happening in a place where everybody knows everything about tech or thinks they do? Explain how both sides are going to try to make their case and about how this jury selection is unfolding when it feels like everybody's got an opinion about Elon Musk.
Yeah, this is happening in Oakland, California, where you would imagine a lot of the potential jurors are people that either work in tech or are very close to tech and understand exactly what's going on here. They probably have very strong feelings about both Sam Altman and Elon Musk. That makes jury selection such a complicated situation, although I should point out the jury here is going to be in an advisory role. The judge is going to listen to what this jury says, but really it's up to the judge in terms of how they want to decide who wins this case. Now, again, we're in jury selection. It's the early stages of this, but just to outline exactly what we're talking about here, Elon Musk sued Sam Altman in 2024, basically saying along the lines that he felt swindled by OpenAI's choice to go from a not-for-profit company into a for-profit company. There's a flow chart that we have here. It is very confusing, but basically all you need to know is that OpenAI is still a nonprofit, but there's been a change in its corporate structure over the last few years where there's now a for-profit group called OpenAI that has part ownership from OpenAI, part ownership from Microsoft. That's the reason why Microsoft is a part of this as well. And Elon Musk essentially said, that's not what I agreed to when I helped you create OpenAI in 2015, whereas you have Sam Altman and OpenAI pushing back and saying Elon Musk at one point wanted to fold OpenAI into Tesla, which is obviously a for-profit company. So there's a lot of he said in this case. This is a 50% part story about the future of AI, 50% story, schoolyard fight between two of the richest in the world. No big deal, Hallie.
I mean, you're so right. So what happens? What's the judge going to decide, and what does it mean for OpenAI? Because maker of ChatGPT, everybody wants to know what's going on with Chat.
Yeah, well, look, OpenAI is in the middle of a massive fight against other AI companies like Meta, Anthropic, as well as Google. So this comes at a very inconvenient time for them, and even more so when you consider that what Elon Musk is asking is for the for-profit end of OpenAI to potentially give up over $130 billion. I mean, just to set the stage, that is more than the market cap of Ford and GM combined. This is a massive amount of money. But I should point out, Elon doesn't want to pocket that money. He has said in a filing that he would want OpenAI's not-for-profit side of the business to pay that over $130 billion to the not-for-profit side. Again, if he wins, he's also asking for Sam Altman to get booted from the company. That would be a big deal, would entirely shake up the artificial intelligence race. We'll have to see what a judge says when this wraps up. But we'll be watching this one very closely, as you can imagine.
Not to handicap the whole thing, but do we have any sense from talking with legal experts about tea leaves on this, whether they think Musk is asking for too much, how they think the judge could rule here, before it begins, or is it just totally a jump ball?
Well, I do think that the jury is a huge part of this story. If it were not for the fact that they're an advisory, I think that they would likely be the entire focus of this. Obviously, you have a lot of people in the Bay Area that feel very negatively about Elon Musk. As we've been watching jury selection throughout the day, there have been a number of anecdotes where some potential jurors said such strong feelings about Elon Musk that the Elon's attorneys wanted to strike them separately outside of what the judge thought. So again, it's going to be hard to find the people in this room already. But of course, the judge is going to have a final say here, so we'll have to see.
All right, Brian Chung, thank you very much. Come back when things heat up on that one. Sounds like it'll happen quickly. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, let me show you here some first responders looking for survivors after a horrific train crash in Indonesia. One of the train cars was just totally destroyed. Officials say 4 people were killed with at least 35 others hurt. We still don't know why the collision happened in the first place. Number 2, the woman accusing Harvey Weinstein of rape testified that he told her, quote, "You don't want to make me an enemy," on the night of the alleged assault. Jessica Mann accuses Weinstein of attacking her in a hotel room back in 2013. This is the 3rd time Weinstein's ended up on trial for these charges. He denies the allegations and has pleaded not guilty. Number 3, Florida is now jumping into the so-called redistricting wars. Governor Ron DeSantis rolling out his plan for a new congressional map that could create 4 new Republican GOP-leaning seats in Congress in Washington. Remember, states like Texas, red, Virginia, blue, have redrawn their maps. It's been a little bit of a wash so far on who gets the advantage. The governor's office has not responded to our request for comment. The king of pop, number 4, is now the king of the box office, with the Michael Jackson movie breaking the record for most money made for a film about a music star on opening weekend. $100 million in sales from the U.S. alone. But critics have slammed the whole thing for not touching on allegations of sexual misconduct. Jackson's daughter, Paris, even called it in her words, fantasy land. Number 5, looks like Zoe Kravitz may move to Harry's house soon. That's the name of one of Harry Styles' albums, by the way. A bunch of reports say that both she and Styles are now engaged, with the internet abuzz with rumors ever since Kravitz started wearing a ring last week. We're out to the reps for comment, no word yet. We'll keep you posted. Wedding watch for those two, TBD. To tonight's original now, with some in-depth reporting on a topic we've been watching. And tonight it's back to our top story, that shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And the conspiracy theories spreading like tinfoil hats in some corners of the internet about what happened that night. Our Julie Sirkin has the reality check.
Moments after shots were fired at Saturday's White House Correspondents' Dinner, social media sleuths tried to answer swirling questions with unfounded conspiracy theories. People across the political spectrum baselessly calling the shooting staged, even as there's nothing to back that up, with authorities instead releasing evidence showing the suspect, Cole Thomas Allen, allegedly storming through security armed, and countless journalists on site for the event working the story in real time. Still, posts containing the term staged now surging on social media, featured in more than 700,000 posts since midnight on Sunday, according to data by Tweetbinder.
Just got home from the White House Correspondents' Dinner. It's after midnight.
After my own Instagram post directly following the shooting, people flooded my comments with accusations it was all staged, speculating the attack was a stunt to boost the president's ratings. Some of the theories fueled in part by these comments from White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt ahead of the dinner.
This speech tonight will be classic Donald J. Trump. It'll be funny, it'll be entertaining. There will be some shots fired tonight in the room.
The relatively innocuous comment referencing what was to come in the president's speech then went viral after the incident. Today, Leavitt was asked about the proliferation of misinformation, calling it nonsense.
It's very important to us that we get the truth and the facts about this case and any case out there as quickly as possible to dispel some of that crazy nonsense that you do see running rampant online.
Adding to the conspiracy intrigue, a number of Trump allies posted on social media arguing the attack proves why the White House needs a new ballroom, just minutes before the president made a similar point in his press conference. The messaging does not mean the shooting was staged. Ashley St. Clair, a former right-wing influencer who's been recently critical of Trump, did not entertain the idea of a so-called staged incident, but took to TikTok to explain the tweets.
They coordinate their messaging in lockstep via group chat.
The administration did not comment specifically on St. Clair's assertion, but a White House spokesperson tells us, quote, anyone who thinks President Trump staged his own assassination attempts is a complete moron. Conspiracy theories in America have been common aftershocks around political earthquakes, but they seem to be forming and flying around the internet faster than ever before.
Social media is full of AI fakes, political showmanship, and people are accustomed to being lied to. And so they don't necessarily anymore believe the truth when it's presented to them.
2 years later, there is still a contingent of doubters with unfounded allegations after the assassination attempt against then-candidate Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. The president responding to the quick spread of such theories in a 60 Minutes interview Sunday.
I think they're more sick than they are con people, but there's a lot of con in it too. I haven't heard that last night didn't happen. Usually it takes a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Usually they wait about 2 or 3 months to start saying that.
At the moment, it seems like lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are staying above the fray and out of speculation, while some also recognizing how quickly they're popping up. Like when I asked Congressman Jamie Raskin about it just minutes after Saturday night's incident.
This is going to fuel all that stuff, I'm sure.
Fanning the flames online as authorities push forward with the high-stakes investigation.
Julie is joining us now. And Julie, part of this, too, is that there are images that are just not real. They're made up that circulate online. We've seen that in other instances before. There's people purporting to have information that they don't actually have or presenting themselves as somebody who they aren't actually online as well. So it's some of the misinformation stuff that we typically deal with in any political setting that's also coming to light in this instance, too.
Yeah, absolutely, Hallie. You talk about those images, those videos. I didn't really have time to look at my social media while I was standing and reporting out there, but I did very quickly see that fake images of this suspect, when the president had shared the real one, were popping up. For example, him purportedly being with Usha Vance, the second lady of the United States, years ago. That was fake. That was a video altered by AI. Another image showing that he had ties to the Israeli Defense Forces. That was also fake. So you could see how quickly this misinformation spreads. One of the things that expert that I talked to, social media disinformation expert, one of the things that he said, Hallie, that we didn't have time to include in the piece is that, look, a generation ago, people were patient. They could wait for the news, right? They could wait to turn on the report the following morning. This time around, social media and the misinformation that spreads fills that void as journalists try to get the facts, and that takes time. Hallie?
Julie Sirkin, live for us on the Hill. Jules, thank you very much for that. When we come back, some of the new details just into us about the country's worst measles outbreak in decades. Plus, how Taylor Swift is looking to protect her voice, not just her music, against AI. Next. Some new developments tonight in the suspected murder of 2 Florida doctoral students, with police now discovering human remains in their search. Local police say they found those remains from a waterway near a highway where they'd been looking for one of the students. We've got a note here. Officials have not confirmed whether the remains they found are hers. Nahida Bristi and a fellow student, Jamil Limon, were last seen about a week and a half ago. Last week, officials charged Limon's roommate with 2 counts of first-degree murder, along with some other charges. This is video of the moment when SWAT arrived at that suspect's house to arrest him. According to court documents, just 3 days before Limon and Bristi went missing, the suspect asked ChatGPT, you see it here, what happens if a human has been put in a black garbage bag and thrown in a dumpster? I want to bring in Jesse Kirsch, who's following this difficult story for us. Jesse, what else do we know from these court documents about how officials are tying Limon's roommate to these alleged crimes and anything else on these remains?
Yeah, so going through this filing from prosecutors, Hallie, there are several things that stick out. One, the suspect allegedly changed his story or parts of his story over the course of being interviewed by authorities. We know that he had been interviewed at least once the day before he was arrested on Friday. We learned that at a press conference last week. Authorities also describing finding multiple blood samples, patches of blood, cleaning supplies seeming alleging that there was covering up of the blood damage, right, trying to cover his tracks. And also authorities say that they used cell phone data to track where the suspect was moving and also where his alleged victims were moving. And I believe we have part of that statement from the court documents. We can read it. And it says that the suspect's cell phone places him in the area of both the victim's cellular devices as well as the area of Jamil Limon's dumped body. Pretty blunt wording there from authorities. And I also want to read one more portion of this. Authorities also saying in this document the same cellular device has search histories and purchases of items associated to the victim's demise even before the date of their murders. That is what prosecutors are saying. And that, I think, Hallie, gets at some of the charges this suspect faces, which is 2 counts of first-degree murder premeditated. So authorities are saying not only did he kill his roommate and his roommate's friend, they are alleging that he planned to do this ahead of time, Hallie.
Jesse Kirsch, thank you very much for the update there. I know you'll keep us posted on more developments on that front. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Southern Bureau, officials say a huge fire in Georgia, look at this, wildfire exploded to twice its size overnight. 22,000 acres this thing is. It's burned up 90 buildings. State agencies are telling people they got to get out ASAP across 3 different counties. So far, no reports of anybody hurt. That's the good news there, but obviously a very dangerous situation. Also, out of our Southern Bureau, health officials in South Carolina say that massive measles outbreak there is now over after nearly 1,000 people ended up sick in the last 6 months. It ended in part because of a spike in vaccinations. People went out to go get their measles shots. But before that, it was one of the biggest outbreaks since the WHO declared measles eliminated in the U.S. That status, by the way, is now under review. And out of our Northeast Bureau, quite the surprise for the sheep. Sextuplets. Oh, can you even? The owner of this Vermont sheep says she expected twins from the sheep and said she got 6 little lambs, 6 of them. That is so rare. It is literally, according to some experts, it is actually 1 in a million. Like it happens 1 in every million lamb births. They are very cute. Apparently, mom's doing well. She may not be done building her flock just yet. Love that. Also tonight, one of the most recognizable names in music, Taylor Swift, is taking some steps to try to protect herself from AI, not just her music, but her voice as well. She's filed multiple trademark applications trying to protect a specific likeness from her Eras tour, as well as some audio you're going to recognize, like how she says her name. Listen to this.
Hey, it's Taylor. Hey, it's Taylor Swift.
She doesn't want anybody else AIing that, right? This is the latest move by a big artist to try to protect themselves in this age of AI. It's not unprecedented by a public figure, even if it is the first for a musician with Swift's stature. Remember Matthew McConaughey? We talked about this. He tried to get some similar trademark protections against AI content that misappropriates somebody's likeness. He was granted 8 of those trademark protections. Let me get to Erin McLaughlin. Without getting too into the legalistic lingo on all of this, Swift is one of the biggest pop stars, one of the biggest celebrities in the world, and she's trying to throw some legal muscle behind protecting, her content.
Yeah, that's right, Hallie. And the question being, will she be successful? This application has yet to be granted. Legal experts looking at this situation see this as an attempt in the age of AI for Taylor Swift to protect her image, her likeness, as well as her non-singing voice. Remember, her songs are trademarked, so those can't be legally replicated online, but everything else up for grabs in the era of deep fakes. So her legal team taking this action, again, we'll have to see if it's granted, but this is an effort to sort of give her broader protection from those deep fakes. Take a listen to what one legal expert had to say.
If you are able to secure a trademark on your likeness or your voice, then that is almost like having a legal notice that makes it much easier to get any images or sounds that could be confusingly similar taken down. So if she were able to secure these trademarks, it would make it a lot easier to have images of her removed off the web when she doesn't want them there.
So more protection in theory if these trademarks are granted. But again, this is very much a legal black box. Matthew McConaughey successfully trademarking that, his saying, all right, all right, all right. That has yet to be tested. In fact, none of this stuff has been tested so far in court. But what this does do is it allows a deterrent as well. Last year, Disney issued a cease and desist to Google's Gemini AI model. Gemini was producing likenesses of Disney characters, their films. Gemini then pulled all of that content down at the request of Disney. So it's also seen as an important deterrent going forward as well.
But that is what's so interesting, Erin. You raise this idea there is not some well-charted path that some of these celebrities can take that gives them a blueprint of how to make these moves. It really is, we say unprecedented a lot here in D.C., but it really is unprecedented waters in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And the legal standard here is going to be confusingly similar. Are these AI deepfakes confusingly similar to the content that celebrities such as Taylor Swift, her image, her voice out there on the internet right now?
Erin McLaughlin, very interesting. We'll keep an eye on this one. Thank you. Coming up here on the show, much more to get to, including a potentially dangerous moment for college football, the high-profile gambling arrest that set off shockwaves. Next. Let's talk college football and this moment that has created kind of a seismic shockwave through that world here. A quarterback who could go in the first round next year now says he is a gambling addict. Texas Tech says transfer Brendan Sorsby will enter a residential treatment program because of a betting addiction. The university says it is supporting Brendan through his recovery process for his long-term health and well-being. Sorsby reportedly signed a huge $5 million deal to transfer from Cincinnati to Texas Tech. To be clear, he is not accused of any criminal wrongdoing at this time. We're out to the NCAA for comment. Let me bring in Tim Rowan, NBC News sports reporter, who's joining us now. Okay, Tim. So, what did he do? What does he say he did? What do the people around him say he did as it relates to the gambling here? Because from my understanding, it sounds like it was a number of small bets. And then help us understand how that relates to the NCAA rules.
Yeah, well, all they've announced so far is that he's entered a gambling rehab program. We're still not totally sure on the details, but NCAA rules are clear on this. Players are not allowed to gamble on professional games. They're not allowed to gamble on college games. And also there's a rule that they're not allowed to gamble on their own games. And if a player is found to gamble on a game, involving a team that they're playing for, they could be banned. This could, he could lose his college eligibility. ESPN's reporting that that's basically what he did a few years ago when he was playing at Indiana University, where he was reserve. He reportedly gambled on Indiana games. So the NCAA is investigating now, reportedly, and we'll see what comes of the investigation.
The NCAA president has pushed for federal laws to try to crack down, for federal betting rules, basically. And I wonder, I think there is a level of concern, and you tell me, you're the expert here, on legalized sports gambling and what it can mean for some of these young athletes who've kind of grown up in this world that's very different from what older athletes had to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, look, we all see the gambling advertisements everywhere, right? And I think it's out there and well known that these advertisements target young men, right? And this is exactly the demographic that we're dealing with here. This is a 20-something-year-old kid who is now entering rehab. I mean, he's also one of the faces, or potentially one of the faces, of college football. You mentioned reported $5 million deal, and this is unprecedented that he's coming out and essentially admitting that he has a problem. Admitting, hey, I'm going in and getting treatment for gambling addiction. We haven't seen a player of this caliber come out and say that and admit to it.
Do we know how long he might be in this sort of gambling, I guess rehab is what you could call it, or sort of treatment program that he's voluntarily put himself into?
I mean, all we know right now, he's out indefinitely. We don't know how long he's going to be out. Obviously, now there's reports that the NCAA is investigating. So, it's unclear, obviously several months until the football season starts. But, I don't know. His future is very much in the air right now. And so, we'll have to see how the investigation plays out.
Tim Rowan, we're really glad to have you on. Thank you. I know that's big news in the college football world. Appreciate that. Still to come here on the show, a 40-year-old cold case now solved in Louisiana. But wait till you hear how police say a podcast helped lead to arrest next. Tonight, new details about a true crime podcast delivering real-life results for helping to crack a decades-old cold case in Louisiana. 4 men are now in custody in connection with the murder of a teenage girl years ago. Officials found Roxanne Sharp's body back in February of 1982. She had been raped and strangled, but investigators didn't have much physical evidence. Nobody was ever charged. Fast forward to 2023, detectives reviewed the case again and resubmitted evidence for DNA analysis using, newer technology. They started re-interviewing witnesses and potential suspects. 2 years after that, state police in Louisiana partnered with a radio host to produce this podcast, Who Killed Roxanne? Listen.
We're trying to get as many people involved in Roxanne's story as we can, with the hope that at some point we hit the right person who might know something that can help solve Roxanne's crime.
And that podcast certainly brought in a lot of new attention, a lot of new information, leads, witnesses, investigators that they didn't even know about before. I want to bring in Stephanie Gosk, who's following this story for us. It's so interesting, Steph, because this is, state police wanted to see a result like this. Obviously, a crack in this decades-old case. What did Roxanne Sharp's niece, you spoke with her, what did she tell you about this whole thing?
Hallie, her family had been living with this unsolved crime for decades. And she said the people closest to Roxanne had passed away not knowing what had happened, and it had torn her family apart. But when this podcast came out, what she was surprised to understand is that the community had been living with this as well. And hearing the story told, and told so sensitively, there were people in the community that actually came forward who hadn't come forward in the past and had information that law enforcement said was absolutely critical in establishing timelines, even finding new witnesses. So pretty remarkable local reaction. And now they have these suspects in custody. I had a chance to ask her how the family was feeling about all of that. Listen to what she said. How's your family and the community feeling about the fact that this is now finally going to go to trial after all these years?
Relieved. There'll always be a hole there where she was, but I hope that people can heal once the truth comes out.
I mean, 44 years, that is a long time for a cold case, Hallie.
Yeah, no kidding. And there's also this dynamic here where, you know, the idea, and we've talked about this, the absolute explosion of true crime and popularity for these true crime podcasts, the series, et cetera, and these so-called internet sleuths who, you know, I think for many of them with the best of intentions seek to try to help crack cases. Sometimes we've heard from officials that that's not always so helpful, right? This instance was a good example, though, of people coming together to try to shine a spotlight on this very old case.
Yeah, and there's a real reason why, actually. A lot of podcasts start because someone has an idea to do a podcast, and maybe law enforcement helps, maybe they don't. This was different. Listen to what the podcast producer told the media when they announced these arrests the other day.
I think it's pretty unique. So I mentioned to a public information officer with Louisiana State Police. He was in for an interview, and in passing, I just mentioned that we'd be interested in helping with a cold case. A month or two later, two guys show up and say, we've got one, and that's how we started.
And now they have arrests. So the law enforcement went to them,
right.
Hallie.
Yeah, right. That hand-in-hand cooperation there. Stephanie Goss, thank you so much for your reporting on this. It's just fascinating. Appreciate it. Good to see you. That does it for us for this hour for now, but we've got a lot more coverage picking up right now. We are coming on the air tonight with the new charges against the man accused of trying to assassinate the president at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Some of those brand new details and how he got multiple guns, the other charges he could face soon, and where this investigation goes next. Plus, late today, the red carpet rolled out literally for the royals here in Washington, the pomp and the politics as the king looks to use his relationship with the president to try to repair the rift between the U.S. and the U.K. Then we're watching with more than 40 million people at risk right now. Ton of wind, big hail, maybe powerful tornadoes set to sweep across a bunch of the country. We'll tell you where the already deadly storms are headed next in a moment. Then the battle of the billionaires brewing in the West, the $130 billion trial that could determine the future of one of the world's biggest AI companies, and why a judge says saying Elon Musk is mean won't get you kicked off the jury. Then one of the most well-known voices in the world taking a big step to try to protect herself from AI impersonations.
Are you ready for it?
Taylor Swift is, but can she actually take on AI and win? We've got that coming up a little bit later on in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie. Good to be with you. Tonight, we start with those new charges just in, and maybe more on the way for the suspected shooter at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, accused of trying to kill the president.
Make no mistake, this was an attempted assassination of the President of the United States, with the defendant making clear what his intent was. And that intent was to bring down as many of the high-ranking cabinet officials as he could.
I want to show you now some of the new sketches of that suspect, Cole Allen, teacher, engineer from California, wearing a blue jumpsuit in court for his first appearance. He did not enter a plea. But in court, we heard from federal prosecutors some stuff we didn't know before about what happened Saturday night when he was taken down. You can see that moment right here. They say Allen had a shotgun, a pistol, several knives. Showing off, by the way, some pictures of the weapons you can see here. According to those new court documents, Allen bought both guns from dealers in California, where he's from. And we're just getting into a new angle now of the moment that the president was rushed out of the dinner during all the chaos. You see it here. He's at the dais. He's at that head table. This is from the side. The agents, the Secret Service come. They get him. They take him out. That's the White House Correspondents Association president, Lee Zhejiang, there, too. Remember, Allen wrote in what the DOJ calls a manifesto that he felt it was his duty to target the Trump administration. We've got team coverage tonight. Ryan Riley is standing by for us here in Washington, but I want to start with Gary Grumbach, who is outside court. Walk us through some of the developments there and what we learned from the details revealed in these files now.
Yeah, Tomas Allen walking into federal court here in a blue jumpsuit from the back of the courtroom, charged with 3 counts, read his rights. The 3 charges are, first, the attempted assassination of the President of the United States. If he is convicted on that count, he could spend the rest of his life behind bars. Also charged with the transportation of a firearm and ammunition through interstate commerce during the commission of a felony, and also the discharge of a firearm during a crime of violence, which comes with it a mandatory minimum of 10 years in addition behind bars. Now, he will be detained for the next few days. There's going to be a detention hearing on Thursday back here at federal court. In these types of cases, it is common for the prosecution to ask for the individual to be detained, and it is very common for the magistrate judge in this case to agree to detain him pending trial, but we will see what happens on Thursday. He has not yet made a plea. We do expect that to happen once more evidence is gathered by the prosecutors and for him to put in a plea in May.
All right, Gary Grumbach, thank you very much. Outside court for us. Let me bring in Ryan now and the movements that he had, because he basically booked this hotel room early in the month, about 3 weeks after the president announced he was going to be speaking at this correspondents' dinner.
Exactly. April 6th is when he actually made that initial booking, which is a little bit after Trump made that announcement. And then he took the train, right? So he leaves from California, he goes to Chicago and then to D.C. His hotel reservation was for these 3 days. He checked into the Washington Hilton. And then obviously on Saturday night at 8:40 p.m. is when he breached that security perimeter, which is, not too far outside of those ballroom doors. And so there was that extra layer of security once you got past those magnetometers, which by that point in the night were essentially shut down because they weren't expecting anybody else to come through. So they were starting to collapse those at that point. But as soon as he charged him, obviously, there was this interaction with law enforcement who took him into custody.
Which brings up the question. I think people go, well, wait a second. How in the heck did somebody get this close? It was a floor above the ballroom, to be clear. But even so, in the building where the president was for this dinner, what does it mean about a security failure? I think there are some who would say, well, he was stopped, right? And we're hearing that. The president, via his press secretary today, made very clear he felt like Secret Service did just the right thing to protect him. He raised some questions about the building itself, but he felt like Secret Service did well. The Secret Service director was just on the Hill literally in the last hour, briefing a couple of lawmakers behind closed doors. And I know we're hearing a little bit out of that meeting, right, from some of these members of Congress.
That's right. Senator Durbin said that he didn't really see any security failures based on the briefing itself. And, just the logistics of that building are fascinating. This all came together after that first assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan back in the 80s, right? They needed this sort of more secure facility. It has that walk that's covered. It has a number of built-in features to it, which helps it be this more of a protective building. But, still, once you went through those magnetometers, because you had all these pre-parties beforehand, and those you don't have to go through the security for that. But that was that sort of initial perimeter in terms of the Secret Service's actual protocols of the magnetometers, which weren't all that far from the doors. Of course, it worked in this system. I think the question would be in the future, like, maybe we set that back a little bit, the magnetometer, where that screening would be.
Does this change the footprint for events down the road? We know that I think the Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, is going to hold a meeting on that at some point this week. Real quickly here, senior law enforcement official tells NBC News the suspect's sister says he was part of this group called the Wide Awakes. The acting attorney general today confirmed that they are looking into Cole Allen's connection with this group or this movement or whatever. What can you tell us about him?
Yeah, I mean, definitely sort of a, anti-Trump sort of left-wing group. But just to be clear, there's not any indications that this was directed by anyone. As far as we know, this was a sole act on his own that he engaged in here. That's all the indications we have thus far.
Okay, so then what's next? We're looking ahead to that next court appearance?
Yeah, the detention. I think the detention's kind of already a foregone conclusion in many ways, because the burden shifts, basically, essentially. Though it's almost certain he'll be locked up based on the strong evidence against him.
Or the seriousness of the charges, right? Attempt to assassinate. How do you let somebody like that walk around? Okay. Ryan Riley, thank you very much. Much to follow on that. We will keep an eye, obviously, on all of it, as it's all happening, of course. You've got the Trump family blasting ABC and Jimmy Kimmel after the First Lady, Melania Trump, said that Kimmel, in her words, spread hateful and violent rhetoric. She's referencing a joke that Kimmel made on his show a couple of days before the Correspondents' Dinner, where the bit is like he's the one delivering the speech. You're going to see it. Let me play it.
Our First Lady Melania is here. Look at Melania, so beautiful. Mrs. Trump, you have a glow like an expectant widow.
A glow like an expectant widow, he said. And the backlash to that really erupted at the White House today. Watch.
Much of the manifesto of the would-be assassin is indistinguishable from the words that we hear daily from so many. Who in their right minds says a wife would be glowing over the potential murder of her beloved husband? And having experienced what I did with the First Lady on Saturday night, I can tell you that she was anything but that.
In a post online, the First Lady calls Kimmel a coward who, according to her, keeps hiding behind ABC because he knows the network will keep running cover to protect him. You'll remember Kimmel, of course, was pulled off the air for almost a week after jokes he made about Charlie Kirk's killing. NBC News is out now to ABC, to the Walt Disney Company, to Kimmel's publicist for comment, but we haven't heard back yet. I want to bring in Chloe Malas, who's covering this one for us. You heard the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, as we just showed, sort of link the rhetoric from Kimmel here to some of what she has described as violent rhetoric that, in her view, has led to this culture or this moment where people feel like they can, walk into the correspondents' dinner with a gun. The White House is also making clear that they want ABC to take some action here. We have seen ABC take action against Jimmy Kimmel before in a very different context. Walk us through what we're hearing from everybody on this. Not much yet from Disney, which owns ABC, right?
That's right. We've also reached out to Nexstar and Sinclair, these companies that own many of these ABC local affiliates that air Jimmy Kimmel's late night show. I just got off the phone with Brendan Carr, the head of the FCC, and he said that he had no comment about this right now. But what I will say is that you could potentially see Jimmy's show go off the air, but Disney has been staunchly supporting him ever since he came back to the airwaves in the fall. And really ever since then, the gloves have been off for Jimmy Kimmel. No holds barred. He has been attacking the president and also the First Lady whenever he can. But he's always said that, he stands behind the First Amendment, that this is comedy, and that this is what his late night viewers want to watch. And if they don't want to watch him, I'm paraphrasing here, they can change the channel. But obviously, there are a lot of people that don't like Jimmy Kimmel, and they feel like his jokes push the envelope too far. And so this is all playing out in real time right now. But if you look at what Melania has posted on X, she writes, "Enough is enough. It's time for ABC to take a stand." How many times will ABC's leadership enable Kimmel's atrocious behavior at the expense of our community? And you also have the president, like you said, calling for Disney and ABC to fire Kimmel immediately. So, Hallie, this is a developing story, and we'll keep you posted.
Chloe Malas, thank you very much. Also here in Washington, you've got King Charles and Queen Camilla late today making their first stops on this big 4-day visit to the U.S. They are right now headed to a garden party as we speak over at the British Embassy after, in just the last hour, the red carpet, you see, quite literally rolled out for them. Here they are getting out of their motorcade, both the King and the Queen greeted by the First Lady, greeted by the President as well. The start of a whole bunch of pageantry, but also some diplomacy, too. Officially, this whole thing is to mark the 250th anniversary of American independence from Britain. And obviously, even with the security scare that we talked about on Saturday, this visit is continuing as planned. The royals are kind of tasked with doing something we don't normally see the royals do. That's some heavy lifting when it comes to the diplomatic push to try to repair the rift between the U.S. and the U.K., largely over the U.S.'s war against Iran. I want to get to Monica Alba at the White House. And it's this interesting thing here. The King and President Trump, by the president's own telling, are close. The president has said he loves the guy, basically. They're friends. He's excited for this visit. The president feels very differently about the British prime minister. So here you have King Charles coming. Typically, it would be very ceremonial. We still have a lot of that pageantry, but there's also some politics involved as well.
Yeah, it's hard to ignore the politics here, Hallie. And you're right. The president calls King Charles a fantastic man, someone that he says he's grown quite close with, who he has known for a very long time and has been in touch with on many different topics. So there's always the private conversations that we may not hear a lot about. But this is President Trump that we're talking about, who sometimes does make public things that are intended to be kept behind the scenes. So even if they do have some of these conversations that veer into some of the more controversial topics, it's always possible we will hear a little bit more about them from President Trump's side of things. It is unlikely we will hear very much from Buckingham Palace's perspective, because they say that for the royals, this visit isn't about politics. They say that they would like King Charles and Queen Camilla to stay focused on the shared vision and history of the United States and the UK, but not necessarily to be in the political fray. But again, it's very hard to separate that from what we know President Trump has publicly said when it comes to bashing the UK Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, specifically for his concerns about the war against Iran. And it is possible that that will enter the conversation with the King and Queen. Hallie.
What's not on the schedule as you look ahead, Monica, we've got the garden party, we've got the joint address to Congress tomorrow where the king was invited to talk about, just as you lay out, reaffirming the vision of the special relationship between the two nations. What's not on the schedule is any meeting with Epstein survivors. As expected, we know, and we've spoken with the family of Virginia Roberts Giuffre, for example, one of Epstein's most prominent accusers, given the relationship between King Charles and his brother, the now former Prince Andrew. That has been also, I think, a part of the storyline that's woven through this week.
Yeah, it's hard to also not acknowledge that, even though potentially on this visit you won't see King Charles or Queen Camilla proactively acknowledge that in any way, but it is possible that they could be confronted with questions about that. Certainly there will be reporters around them over the next couple of days. Now, they are sometimes met with these questions and then they simply ignore them, or they don't necessarily engage with them. So it will be interesting to see if they talk about it at all. President Trump, for his part, has not been wanting to talk about Jeffrey Epstein, but his wife, the First Lady, surprised a lot of people a couple of weeks ago when she made that unscheduled appearance to share her thoughts and trying to really distance herself from the late sex offender. So we have seen actually a return to the headlines a little bit on the overall story, and it was the First Lady, Melania Trump, who is pushing for some Epstein survivors and victims to potentially go to Capitol Hill and share their own stories in the form of an open hearing there. It's unclear whether that will actually happen. So it is in the conversation, even though it's not going to be technically on the agenda. Hallie.
Monica Alba live for us there on the North Lawn. Mon, thank you very much. We'll keep an eye on any developments on that front as well, but we've also got to track tonight these storms moving fast, a bunch of them set to slam some 40 million people from Michigan down to Texas. We may see some powerful tornadoes as part of that system too, already in Kansas. Take a look at what they're dealing with. Look how big that hail is there. On your left, you've got Missouri with, wow, that wind is just ripping through. A lot of rain there too. Here's what's left of a barn about 100 miles east of Kansas City. It's torn up into pieces. That's after tornadoes touched down in several states in the last 48 hours. This train derailed in Kansas. And in Oklahoma, we spotted some funnel clouds, too. All of these spots, you can see, are bracing for another round of dangerous storms tonight. We've got team coverage on this. Bill Cairns will have the forecast in a second. But I want to start with Shaquille Brewster out there for us in St. Louis. Shaq, what's it like?
Well, Hallie, right now it's calm. You kind of see it behind me. The sun's peeking out in some places. There was a little bit of rain earlier today, but the warning that you're hearing from many meteorologists, if you watch local news, they are in rolling coverage right now, and that's because these conditions can change extremely quickly. We know that there's a tornado watch going into the evening. There's a threat of that severe weather, the rain, the lightning, the golf ball size hail for much of this area, and the risk, of course, of those tornadoes. And that is why folks in St. Louis have been, they've had their guard up. You've had schools let out early dismissals at several schools, churches canceling some services for this evening. You even had a court, the circuit court, ending the day early because of the threat of not just tornadoes, but possibly strong tornadoes. And there's some fear here. There's some trauma in the St. Louis area. You'll remember it was about a year ago, May 16th, 2025, when you had that outbreak of tornadoes go through, strong tornadoes that tore through the metro St. Louis area. We saw on Sunday, because of this forecast, because of what's expected for later today, you had people waiting in line for hours to get weather radios that were being handed out for free. So that is the situation here. It's calm right now. You see the skies are not too scary, but meteorologists saying that this is a situation that can change very quickly as we get later into the evening, Hallie.
Shaq Brewster, thank you very much for being there. Bill Cairns, that tees you up well, because how many times do you and I sit here and talk about how dangerous it is when night starts to fall right around now, right? It's kind of the witching hour because people are at home. You've got the possibility these twisters could spin up with very little notice.
Yeah, this has all the hallmarks of being a late evening and a dangerous evening well after people go to bed. Earlier today, it rained heavily in this area, so that kind of used up the energy. And so now those clouds had to go away. The sun is back out. That's heating the atmosphere up, and that's the energy for the storms. So that's why we're a little delayed in our severe weather today. But we think it's going to explode as we go throughout the next 6 hours. So we currently have storms. I mean, we've had hail reports. We've had some wind. We even have 2 tornado warnings. The areas in watches go from St. Louis all the way down to Memphis. This one is called a PDS. So that we call a particularly dangerous situation tornado watch. That means the ingredients are there for not just like a regular tornado, but for a strong, possibly a violent tornado, the type that could take out, a community or a town. So that's the area that goes from Paducah to Jackson, Tennessee, to Memphis to Jonesboro. St. Louis is in what we call our regular tornado watch. Still means you can get a strong storm, hopefully just not something that's, violent. So those active tornado warnings, we got two little hooks coming off these storms. This doesn't look too bad on radar right now. These are radar indicated. This is just north of Interstate 70, just north here, east of Columbia, Missouri. This red area in here is our moderate risk. That's where we expect, the greatest chance of those strong tornadoes. And we've kind of extended this a little further to the south there and to include the Memphis area. So this is where we could see what we call EF3. That's considered a strong tornado. The scale goes from 0 to 5 being like, the strongest ones. That the only thing left is usually the slab of the house that it was sitting on. So this is the risk area tonight. And by the time these storms get to Jonesboro, Memphis, and Paducah, it'll probably be like 10 p.m., maybe close to midnight. And so there's going to be a lot of people, going to bed anxious tonight in those areas as we watch those storms. Tomorrow, we still have a threat of storms, Hallie, not the intense danger for those strong tornadoes like this evening. So I'll keep you posted. And, for everyone in those danger areas, make sure you have your phones on tonight.
Yeah, no
whatever,
kidding.
whatever way you get your alerts, make sure you can get them.
Stay close to your camera. Bill Cairns, thanks, pal. Appreciate you. Let's talk about oil prices closing at the highest they've been in 2 weeks today, with the fate of peace talks with Iran very much in limbo. President Trump's meeting with his top national security advisors, as we're learning Iran is offering up this new proposal. They want to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. But this, and that's like a ton of the world's oil goes through that strait. But this Iranian proposal would also kick the can down the road when it comes to nuclear negotiations. That may be a non-starter for the U.S., according to a Gulf source and a regional source. Remember, the president has canceled plans to send officials to Pakistan for talks this past weekend. And in the region, you've got scenes like this in Lebanon as Israel launches strikes, even with that 3-week extension of the ceasefire brokered by the U.S. Let me bring in Matt Bradley in Tel Aviv for us. Okay, so there's this new proposal on the table. Real questions about whether the U.S. is going to pick it up, take it seriously, and where this goes. Help us understand the dynamics, basically, because it feels like maybe the ball is in the American court.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, what we're seeing now is a proposal that could work. It would open up the Strait of Hormuz. It would basically return the situation to the status quo before the war, more or less, with obviously a lot of Iranian losses in leadership and materiel. What it would not do is address that critical question that you're mentioning, the critical question of Iran's ability to enrich further uranium. And the problem is that was one of the main reasons why President Trump and Netanyahu of Israel decided to launch that war on February 28th. And it is still one of the unanswered ambitions of this conflict. So the president is going to have to be in a very, very compromising kind of mood to accept this deal and to give up his leverage over that nuclear file. Even as these negotiations started, the president and his top people have made it very clear that making sure that Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon, at least within the next couple of decades, is one of their priorities. So to accept this proposal, well, it would open up the Strait of Hormuz. It would certainly do a lot to appease markets and American consumers throughout the world who are suffering from these rising prices. What it would not do is help burnish any justification for a war that many Americans and many people here in Israel, a lot of Israelis, are turning against.
What about the role of Russia in all of this? Because the Iranian foreign minister met with Putin today in Russia, right? Like, what's their end game there?
Well, I mean, the Iranian foreign minister is now going around and clearly trying to shore up a bunch of allies. He went to Oman, a country that's near Iran, that was very instrumental in negotiating that President Obama's JCPOA back in 2015, the one that President Trump then tore up. These lifted sanctions on the Iranians at the same time checked their nuclear program. So Oman is a big piece. Abbas Araghchi went to Pakistan twice over the last couple of days. So what we're seeing is Russia kind of on just another stop on a diplomatic tour, trying to get Iran's allies in place before this war restarts and while they're in the process of negotiating. When we're talking about Russia, China, Iran, these are countries that, really exist just on the fringes of the international community. And when one of them gets more and more ostracized, we tend to see the others kind of coalescing. We saw this when Russia invaded Ukraine, but it's never clear whether that actually brings any real benefits to these countries.
Matt Bradley live for us there in Tel Aviv. Matt, thank you very much for that reporting. Appreciate it. Coming up, more to get to here on the show, including some scary stuff out of Indonesia, with crews now looking for survivors after 2 trains collided. What we're learning about what exactly went wrong. Plus, why 2 of the biggest names in tech are facing off in court. At stake, about $100 billion in the future of a massive AI company. We've got the insults next. So in the last couple of hours, attorneys for Elon Musk and a California judge have been butting heads during jury selection in this massive multi-billion-dollar civil trial pitting tech billionaire against tech billionaire. It's a case that could determine the future of one of the world's biggest AI companies. And that is just the latest drama here. In the last couple of hours, a judge told attorneys for Musk that the reality is that people don't like him, but went on to say that that doesn't mean Americans can't have integrity for the judicial process. That was after she didn't strike a juror who said so-called mean things about Musk. It is like something, gang. The whole thing is partly a business fight, but it's also pretty personal for Sam Altman and for Musk. Their beef has been public for years. About a decade ago, Musk co-founded and helped fund OpenAI as a nonprofit. But Musk says Altman betrayed him when he made the nonprofit for profit. Altman, for his part, says Musk just wanted OpenAI for himself. It's been a whole thing for years. Lately, Musk has been calling his now nemesis Scam Altman, saying that Altman and OpenAI's co-founders stole a charity, quote unquote. Brian Chung is following this story for us. This is not exactly petty drama. There's $134 billion on the line in this civil trial. And it's also interesting, and that's why the judge stuff just in the last couple of minutes was interesting, because how do you find a juror that doesn't have feelings about either of these two guys, especially when this is happening in a place where everybody knows everything about tech or thinks they do? Explain how both sides are going to try to make their case and about how this jury selection is unfolding when it feels like everybody's got an opinion about Elon Musk.
Yeah, this is happening in Oakland, California, where you would imagine a lot of the potential jurors are people that either work in tech or are very close to tech and understand exactly what's going on here. They probably have very strong feelings about both Sam Altman and Elon Musk. That makes jury selection such a complicated situation, although I should point out the jury here is going to be in an advisory role. The judge is going to listen to what this jury says, but really it's up to the judge in terms of how they want to decide who wins this case. Now, again, we're in jury selection. It's the early stages of this, but just to outline exactly what we're talking about here, Elon Musk sued Sam Altman in 2024, basically saying along the lines that he felt swindled by OpenAI's choice to go from a not-for-profit company into a for-profit company. There's a flow chart that we have here. It is very confusing, but basically all you need to know is that OpenAI is still a nonprofit, but there's been a change in its corporate structure over the last few years where there's now a for-profit group called OpenAI that has part ownership from OpenAI, part ownership from Microsoft. That's the reason why Microsoft is a part of this as well. And Elon Musk essentially said, that's not what I agreed to when I helped you create OpenAI in 2015, whereas you have Sam Altman and OpenAI pushing back and saying Elon Musk at one point wanted to fold OpenAI into Tesla, which is obviously a for-profit company. So there's a lot of he said in this case. This is a 50% part story about the future of AI, 50% story, schoolyard fight between two of the richest in the world. No big deal, Hallie.
I mean, you're so right. So what happens? What's the judge going to decide, and what does it mean for OpenAI? Because maker of ChatGPT, everybody wants to know what's going on with Chat.
Yeah, well, look, OpenAI is in the middle of a massive fight against other AI companies like Meta, Anthropic, as well as Google. So this comes at a very inconvenient time for them, and even more so when you consider that what Elon Musk is asking is for the for-profit end of OpenAI to potentially give up over $130 billion. I mean, just to set the stage, that is more than the market cap of Ford and GM combined. This is a massive amount of money. But I should point out, Elon doesn't want to pocket that money. He has said in a filing that he would want OpenAI's not-for-profit side of the business to pay that over $130 billion to the not-for-profit side. Again, if he wins, he's also asking for Sam Altman to get booted from the company. That would be a big deal, would entirely shake up the artificial intelligence race. We'll have to see what a judge says when this wraps up. But we'll be watching this one very closely, as you can imagine.
Not to handicap the whole thing, but do we have any sense from talking with legal experts about tea leaves on this, whether they think Musk is asking for too much, how they think the judge could rule here, before it begins, or is it just totally a jump ball?
Well, I do think that the jury is a huge part of this story. If it were not for the fact that they're an advisory, I think that they would likely be the entire focus of this. Obviously, you have a lot of people in the Bay Area that feel very negatively about Elon Musk. As we've been watching jury selection throughout the day, there have been a number of anecdotes where some potential jurors said such strong feelings about Elon Musk that the Elon's attorneys wanted to strike them separately outside of what the judge thought. So again, it's going to be hard to find the people in this room already. But of course, the judge is going to have a final say here, so we'll have to see.
All right, Brian Chung, thank you very much. Come back when things heat up on that one. Sounds like it'll happen quickly. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, let me show you here some first responders looking for survivors after a horrific train crash in Indonesia. One of the train cars was just totally destroyed. Officials say 4 people were killed with at least 35 others hurt. We still don't know why the collision happened in the first place. Number 2, the woman accusing Harvey Weinstein of rape testified that he told her, quote, "You don't want to make me an enemy," on the night of the alleged assault. Jessica Mann accuses Weinstein of attacking her in a hotel room back in 2013. This is the 3rd time Weinstein's ended up on trial for these charges. He denies the allegations and has pleaded not guilty. Number 3, Florida is now jumping into the so-called redistricting wars. Governor Ron DeSantis rolling out his plan for a new congressional map that could create 4 new Republican GOP-leaning seats in Congress in Washington. Remember, states like Texas, red, Virginia, blue have redrawn their maps. It's been a little bit of a wash so far on who gets the advantage. The governor's office has not responded to our request for comment. The king of pop, number 4, is now the king of the box office with the Michael Jackson movie breaking the record for most money made for a film about a music star on opening weekend. $100 million in sales from the U.S. alone. But critics have slammed the whole thing for not touching on allegations of sexual misconduct. Jackson's daughter, Paris, even called it in her words, fantasy land. Number 5, looks like Zoe Kravitz may move to Harry's house soon. That's the name of one of Harry Styles' albums, by the way. A bunch of reports say that both she and Styles are now engaged, with the internet abuzz with rumors ever since Kravitz started wearing a ring last week. We're out to the reps for comment, no word yet. We'll keep you posted. Wedding watch for those two, TBD. To tonight's original now with some in-depth reporting on a topic we've been watching. And tonight it's back to our top story, that shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And the conspiracy theories spreading like tinfoil hats in some corners of the internet about what happened that night. Our Julie Sirkin has the reality check.
Moments after shots were fired at Saturday's White House Correspondents' Dinner, social media sleuths tried to answer swirling questions with unfounded conspiracy theories. People across the political spectrum baselessly calling the shooting staged, even as there's nothing to back that up, with authorities instead releasing evidence showing the suspect, Cole Thomas Allen, allegedly storming through security armed, and countless journalists on site for the event working the story in real time. Still, posts containing the term staged now surging on social media, featured in more than 700,000 posts since midnight on Sunday, according to data by Tweetbinder.
Just got home from the White House Correspondents' Dinner. It's after midnight.
After my own Instagram post directly following the shooting, people flooded my comments with accusations it was all staged, speculating the attack was a stunt to boost the president's ratings. Some of the theories fueled in part by these comments from White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt ahead of the dinner.
This speech tonight will be classic Donald J. Trump. It'll be funny. It'll be entertaining. There will be some shots fired tonight in the room.
The relatively innocuous comment referencing what was to come in the president's speech then went viral after the incident. Today, Leavitt was asked about the proliferation of misinformation, calling it nonsense.
It's very important to us that we get the truth and the facts about this case and any case out there as quickly as possible to dispel some of that crazy nonsense that you do see running rampant online.
Adding to the conspiracy intrigue, a number of Trump allies posted on social media arguing the attack proves why the White House needs a new ballroom, just minutes before the president made a similar point in his press conference. The messaging does not mean the shooting was staged. Ashley St. Clair, a former right-wing influencer who's been recently critical of Trump, did not entertain the idea of a so-called staged incident, but took to TikTok to explain the tweets.
They coordinate their messaging in lockstep via group chat.
The administration did not comment specifically on St. Clair's assertion, but a White House spokesperson tells us, quote, anyone who thinks President Trump staged his own assassination attempts is a complete moron. Conspiracy theories in America have been common aftershocks around political earthquakes, but they seem to be forming and flying around the internet faster than ever before.
Social media is full of AI fakes, political showmanship, and people are accustomed to being lied to. And so they don't necessarily anymore believe the truth when it's presented to them.
2 years later, there is still a contingent of doubters with unfounded allegations after the assassination attempt against then-candidate Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. The president responding to the quick spread of such theories in a 60 Minutes interview Sunday.
I think they're more sick than they are con people, but it is a lot of con in it too. I haven't heard that last night didn't happen. What usually takes a little bit longer. Yeah. Usually they wait about 2 or 3 months to start saying that.
At the moment, it seems like lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are staying above the fray and out of speculation, while some also recognizing how quickly they're popping up. Like when I asked Congressman Jamie Raskin about it just minutes after Saturday night's incident.
This is going to fuel all that stuff, I'm sure.
Fanning the flames online as authorities push forward with the high-stakes investigation.
Julie is joining us now. And Julie, part of this, too, is that there are images that are just not real. They're made up that circulate online. We've seen that in other instances before. There's people purporting to have information that they don't actually have or presenting themselves as somebody who they aren't actually online as well. So it's some of the misinformation stuff that we typically deal with in any political setting that's also coming to light in this instance, too.
Yeah, absolutely, Hallie. You talk about those images, those videos. I didn't really have time to look at my social media while I was standing and reporting out there, but I did very quickly see that fake images of this suspect, when the president had shared the real one, were popping up. For example, him purportedly being with Usha Vance, the second lady of the United States, years ago. That was fake. That was a video altered by AI. Another image showing that he had ties to the Israeli Defense Forces. That was also fake. So you could see how quickly this misinformation spreads. One of the things that expert that I talked to, social media disinformation expert, one of the things that he said, Hallie, that we didn't have time to include in the piece is that, look, a generation ago, people were patient. They could wait for the news, right? They could wait to turn on the report the following morning. This time around, social media and the misinformation that spreads fills that void as journalists try to get the facts, and that takes time. Hallie?
Julie Sirkin, live for us on the Hill. Jules, thank you very much for that. When we come back, some of the new details just into us about the country's worst measles outbreak in decades. Plus, how Taylor Swift is looking to protect her voice, not just her music, against AI. Next. Some new developments tonight in the suspected murder of 2 Florida doctoral students, with police now discovering human remains in their search. Local police say they found those remains from a waterway near a highway where they'd been looking for one of the students. We've got a note here. Officials have not confirmed whether the remains they found are hers. Nahida Bristi and a fellow student, Jamil Limon, were last seen about a week and a half ago. Last week, officials charged Limon's roommate with 2 counts of first-degree murder, along with some other charges. This is video of the moment when SWAT arrived at that suspect's house to arrest him. According to court documents, just 3 days before Limon and Bristi went missing, the suspect asked ChatGPT, you see it here, what happens if a human has been put in a black garbage bag and thrown in a dumpster? I want to bring in Jesse Kirsch, who's following this difficult story for us. Jesse, what else do we know from these court documents about how officials are tying Limon's roommate to these alleged crimes and anything else on these remains?
Yeah, so going through this filing from prosecutors, Hallie, there are several things that stick out. One, the suspect allegedly changed his story or parts of his story over the course of being interviewed by authorities. We know that he had been interviewed at least once the day before he was arrested on Friday. We learned that at a press conference last week. Authorities also describing finding multiple blood samples, patches of blood, cleaning supplies seeming alleging that there was covering up of the blood damage, right, trying to cover his tracks. And also authorities say that they used cell phone data to track where the suspect was moving and also where his alleged victims were moving. And I believe we have part of that statement from the court documents. We can read it. And it says that the suspect's cell phone places him in the area of both the victim's cellular devices as well as the area of Jamil Limon's dumped body. Pretty blunt wording there from authorities. And I also want to read one more portion of this. Authorities also saying in this document, the same cellular device has search histories and purchases of items associated to the victim's demise even before the date of their murders. That is what prosecutors are saying. And that, I think, Hallie, gets at some of the charges the suspect faces, which is 2 counts of first-degree murder premeditated. So authorities are saying not only did he kill his roommate and his roommate's friend, they are alleging that he planned to do this ahead of time, Hallie.
Jesse Kirsch, thank you very much for the update there. I know you'll keep us posted on more developments on that front. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Southern Bureau, officials say a huge fire in Georgia, look at this, wildfire exploded to twice its size overnight. 22,000 acres this thing is. It's burned up 90 buildings. State agencies are telling people they got to get out ASAP across 3 different counties. So far, no reports of anybody hurt. That's the good news there, but obviously a very dangerous situation. Also, out of our Southern Bureau, health officials in South Carolina say that massive measles outbreak there is now over after nearly 1,000 people ended up sick in the last 6 months. It ended in part because of a spike in vaccinations. People went out to go get their measles shots. But before that, it was one of the biggest outbreaks since the WHO declared measles eliminated in the U.S. That status, by the way, is now under review. And out of our Northeast Bureau, quite the surprise for the sheep. Sextuplets. Oh, can you even? The owner of this Vermont sheep says she expected twins from the sheep and said she got 6 little lambs, 6 of them. That is so rare. It is literally, according to some experts, it is actually 1 in a million. Like it happens 1 in every million lamb births. They are very cute. Apparently, mom's doing well. She may not be done building her flock just yet. Love that. Also tonight, one of the most recognizable names in music, Taylor Swift, is taking some steps to try to protect herself from AI, not just her music, but her voice as well. She's filed multiple trademark applications trying to protect a specific likeness from her Eras tour, as well as some audio you're going to recognize, like how she says her name. Listen to this.
Hey, it's Taylor. Hey, it's Taylor Swift.
She doesn't want anybody else AIing that, right? This is the latest move by a big artist to try to protect themselves in this age of AI. It's not unprecedented by a public figure, even if it is the first for a musician with Swift's stature. Remember Matthew McConaughey? We talked about this. He tried to get some similar trademark protections against AI content that misappropriates somebody's likeness. He was granted 8 of those trademark protections. Let me get to Aaron McLaughlin. Without getting too into the legalistic lingo on all of this, Swift is one of the biggest pop stars, one of the biggest celebrities in the world, and she's trying to throw some legal muscle behind protecting, her content.
Yeah, that's right, Hallie. And the question being, will she be successful? This application has yet to be granted. Legal experts looking at this situation see this as an attempt in the age of AI for Taylor Swift to protect her image, her likeness, as well as her non-singing voice. Remember, her songs are trademarked, so those can't be legally replicated online, but everything else up for grabs in the era of deep fakes. So her legal team taking this action, again, we'll have to see if it's granted, but this is an effort to sort of give her broader protection from those deep fakes. Take a listen to what one legal expert had to say.
If you are able to secure a trademark on your likeness or your voice, then that is almost like having a legal notice that makes it much easier to get any images or sounds that could be confusingly similar taken down. So if she were able to secure these trademarks, it would make it a lot easier to have images of her removed off the web when she doesn't want them there.
So more protection in theory if these trademarks are granted. But again, this is very much a legal black box. Matthew McConaughey successfully trademarking that, his saying, all right, all right, all right. That has yet to be tested. In fact, none of this stuff has been tested so far in court. But what this does do is it allows a deterrent as well. Last year, Disney issued a cease and desist to Google's Gemini AI model. Gemini was producing likenesses of Disney characters, their films. Gemini then pulled all of that content down at the request of Disney. So it's also seen as an important deterrent going forward as well.
But that is what's so interesting, Aaron. You raise this idea, like there is not some well-charted path that some of these celebrities can take that gives them a blueprint of how to make these moves. It really is, you know, we say unprecedented a lot here in D.C., but it really is unprecedented waters in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And the legal standard here is going to be confusingly similar. Are these AI deepfakes confusingly similar to the content that celebrities such as Taylor Swift, her image, her voice out there on the internet right now?
Aaron McLaughlin, very interesting. We'll keep an eye on this one. Thank you. Coming up here on the show, much more to get to, including a potentially dangerous moment for college football, the high-profile gambling arrest that set off shockwaves. Next. Let's talk college football and this moment that has created kind of a seismic shockwave through that world here. A quarterback who could go in the first round next year now says he is a gambling addict. Texas Tech says transfer Brendan Sorsby will enter a residential treatment program because of a betting addiction. The university says it is supporting Brendan through his recovery process for his long-term health and well-being. Sorsby reportedly signed a huge $5 million deal to transfer from Cincinnati to Texas Tech. To be clear, he is not accused of any criminal wrongdoing at this time. We're out to the NCAA for comment. Let me bring in Tim Rowan, NBC News sports reporter, who's joining us now. Okay, Tim. So, you know, what did he do? What does he say he did? What do the people around him say he did as it relates to the gambling here? Because from my understanding, it sounds like it was a number of small bets. And then help us understand how that relates to the NCAA rules.
Yeah, well, all they've announced so far is that he's entered a gambling rehab program. We're still not totally sure on the details, but NCAA rules are clear on this. Players are not allowed to gamble on professional games. They're not allowed to gamble on college games. And also there's a rule that they're not allowed to gamble on their own games. And if a player is found to gamble on a game, involving a team that they're playing for, they could be banned. He could lose his college eligibility. ESPN's reporting that that's basically what he did a few years ago when he was playing at Indiana University, where he was reserve. He reportedly gambled on Indiana games. So the NCAA is investigating now, reportedly, and we'll see what comes of the investigation.
The NCAA president has pushed for federal laws to try to crack down, for federal betting rules, basically. And I wonder, I think there is a level of concern, and you tell me, you're the expert here, on legalized sports gambling and what it can mean for some of these young athletes who've kind of grown up in this world that's very different from what older athletes had to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, look, we all see the gambling advertisements everywhere, right? And I think it's out there and well known that these advertisements target young men, right? And this is exactly the demographic that we're dealing with here. This is a 20-something-year-old kid who is now entering rehab. I mean, he's also one of the faces, or potentially one of the faces, of college football. You mentioned reported $5 million deal, and this is unprecedented that he's coming out and essentially admitting that he has a problem. Admitting, hey, I'm going in and getting treatment for gambling addiction. We haven't seen a player of this caliber come out and say that and admit to it.
Do we know how long he might be in this sort of gambling, rehab is what you could call it, or sort of treatment program that he's voluntarily put himself into?
I mean, all we know right now, he's out indefinitely. We don't know how long he's going to be out. Obviously, now there's reports that the NCAA is investigating. So, it's unclear, obviously several months until the football season starts. But, I don't know. His future is very much in the air right now. And so, we'll have to see how the investigation plays out.
Tim Rowan, we're really glad to have you on. Thank you. I know that's big news in the college football world. Appreciate that. Still to come here on the show, a 40-year-old cold case now solved in Louisiana. But wait till you hear how police say a podcast helped lead to arrest next. Tonight, new details about a true crime podcast delivering real-life results for helping to crack a decades-old cold case in Louisiana. 4 men are now in custody in connection with the murder of a teenage girl years ago. Officials found Roxanne Sharp's body back in February of 1982. She had been raped and strangled, but investigators didn't have much physical evidence. Nobody was ever charged. Fast forward to 2023, detectives reviewed the case again and resubmitted evidence for DNA analysis using, newer technology. They started re-interviewing witnesses and potential suspects. 2 years after that, state police in Louisiana partnered with a radio host to produce this podcast, Who Killed Roxanne? Listen.
We're trying to get as many people involved in Roxanne's story as we can, with the hope that at some point we hit the right person who might know something that can help solve Roxanne's crime.
And that podcast certainly brought in a lot of new attention, a lot of new information, leads, witnesses, investigators said they didn't even know about before. I want to bring in Stephanie Gosk, who's following this story for us. It's so interesting, Steph, because this is, state police wanted to see a result like this. Obviously, a crack in this decades-old case. What did Roxanne Sharp's niece, you spoke with her, what did she tell you about this whole thing?
Hallie, her family had been living with this unsolved crime for decades. And she said the people closest to Roxanne had passed away not knowing what had happened. And it had torn her family apart. But when this podcast came out, what she was surprised to understand is that the community had been living with this as well. And hearing the story told, and told so sensitively, there were people in the community that actually came forward who hadn't come forward in the past and had information that law enforcement said was absolutely critical in establishing timelines, even finding new witnesses. So pretty remarkable local reaction. And now they have these suspects in custody. I had a chance to ask her how the family was feeling about all of that. Listen to what she said. How's your family and the community feeling about the fact that this is now finally going to go to trial after all these years?
Relieved. There will always be a hole there where she was, but I hope that people can heal once the truth comes out.
I mean, 44 years, that is a long time for a cold case, Hallie.
Yeah, no kidding. And there's also this dynamic here where, the idea, and we've talked about this, the absolute explosion of true crime and popularity for these true crime podcasts, the series, et cetera, and these so-called internet sleuths who, I think for many of them with the best of intentions seek to try to help crack cases. Sometimes we've heard from officials that that's not always so helpful, right? This instance was a good example, though, of people coming together to try to shine a spotlight on this very old case.
Yeah, and there's a real reason why, actually. A lot of podcasts start because someone has an idea to do a podcast, and maybe law enforcement helps, maybe they don't. This was different. Listen to what the podcast producer told the media when they announced these arrests the other day.
I think it's pretty unique. So I mentioned to a public information officer with Louisiana State Police. He was in for an interview, and in passing, I just mentioned that we'd be interested in helping with a cold case. A month or two later, two guys show up and say, we've got one, and that's how we started.
And now they have arrests. So the law enforcement went to them,
right.
Hallie.
Yeah, right. That hand-in-hand cooperation there. Stephanie Gosk, thank you so much for your reporting on this. It's just fascinating. Appreciate it. Good to see you. That does it for us for this hour for now, but we've got a lot more coverage picking up right now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.